I stood up and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna go talk to your bushes for a second. And then I got kind of embarrassed. I was like, I'm sorry, man. Come over to hang out. It's been a while. And then I threw up in your bushes.
It happens.
Hello, friends. My name is Blue Mitchell.
And I'm Michael Kirchhoff. And these are
the Diffusion Tapes.
Welcome to the Diffusion Tapes, a podcast where we chat with artists, writers, and curators working in the field of artfully crafted photography. Produced and hosted by Blue Mitchell, publisher of Diffusion Annual and founder of 112 Publishing. Co-hosted by Michael Kirchhoff, editor-in-chief at Analog Forever magazine and founder of Catalyst Interviews. In these conversations, we chat with folks whose fascinating work and intriguing life path arouse the senses. And we're inviting you into the conversation.
Tell me about Harley.
Yeah, so today on the tapes, we have actually a good friend of mine, Harley Cowan, who I met prior to either one of us being very active in the photo community. I was in school studying photography, and when I met him, he was an architect, and we basically would meet at dinner parties, get-togethers with the architecture community. And then now, nearly 20 years later, we're like all about photography. Harley Cowan, he's a photographer, an architect based in Portland, Oregon. He shoots large format, and he has a keen interest in architectural heritage, documentation, and historical preservation. In fact, I just saw some of his work at the Portland airport on my way to LA in December. He had his series up, Historic Wonderland, which is kind of cool because it was up for 6 months at the airport. So I'm guessing a ton of people saw his work.
Wow. That's amazing. Like so many people would see your work over that length of time. Thousands and thousands and tens of thousands easily.
And then his name, Harley Cowan up on the wall.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good. Okay, so in our chat with Harley, he had just returned from an amazing artist in residence located in the Arctic. And so he shared some of the once-in-a-lifetime experiences with us. And actually, if you visit his Instagram right now, he's been scanning a bunch of film from his trip.
It's like watching like this work in progress of somebody creating a body of work. He did this residency, and now he's working on it step by step and documenting it along the way on his Instagram, which is like the perfect tool to do something like that.
It is, yeah. It's cool for us timing-wise because we talked to him right after the trip, so it was fresh in his brain. So we got all the good, juicy stuff.
Yeah. And
then now, right as we're releasing this, he's flooded his Instagram with scans from the trip. So it's really good timing to share his work.
Yeah. And as they come out, like I'm really eager to see them come out. And what gets me about Harley is, he's an architect. He didn't come into photography like you or I. Like we started with photography and art, and that was the process. And I've been in photography all my life, but he was an architect, and he kind of he didn't fall into it, but it became a new passion. That it's interesting to see somebody discover something later in life and really excel at it from the get-go. It's like, seems like immediately, like it probably wasn't. It was a very long, tedious process. But to pick up something like working in the dark room and large format photography, it's one thing to work in photography, but to do things like that these days, that's a whole nother level of dedication.
Nowadays, most people will be like, I'm going to buy a digital camera and I'm going to take some photos and I'm going to learn how to do Lightroom, and I'm going to, since I'm an architect, I'm going to focus on architecture. But he just decided, and I think it says a lot about the people that he was attracted to, getting turned on to just analog in general, and then showing up at Blue Moon Camera, and then learning from the people at Blue Moon Camera, about cameras and also just the culture of analog, really, in a lot of ways. Let's hear our chat with atomic photographer Harley Cowan.
I hear Harley's blowing up.
So Harley,
yeah,
thanks for coming on to the Diffusion Tapes.
Excited to be here. This is cool.
So let's just jump right in here, Harley.
Sure.
I know you and Michael don't know each other, so this will be a kind of a get to know you for you guys.
Totally.
Yeah.
We have a non-photographic history, actually, Harley and I.
It's funny, right?
Yeah. So we met through a mutual friend, which was really the tie together there was architecture, which to our listeners, Harley is an architect.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, maybe tell us a little bit about that, Harley. How long you been doing architecture?
Let's see. Went to Washington State University and then came out here after college, which was that would have been 1996. Been here ever since. And so that's about, what is that now, 25, 26 years. Originally, I was doing overseas work, doing some stuff in Africa, and we're doing a lot of work with oil companies and master planning campuses and stuff in these strange areas in the oil fields out in Kazakhstan or in Nigeria. And at the time, we had an intern at the office, Colleen, and then Brent came along, and that's how we met, was through, because you were friends with them. And you came out here when? What was it, 90, 97, 98? Or was it earlier?
No, I came to Portland in 2002.
It wasn't until then.
Yeah, and my wife worked with Colleen at an architecture firm. They're both interior designers. So
that's right.
Michael, Harley, and I met basically at house parties with these guys through. So yeah, so I basically met Harley in a more party situation, not professional at all.
Right, but related directly back to your work as an architect.
Yeah, well, we knew all the same people in all the architects. It's kind of Portland's not too big a town, so you get to know everybody pretty quickly. And yeah, we were always going to the same events, the same Halloween parties, the same holiday parties, house parties, whatever. I don't think either of us were. Well, I don't know what you were doing in photography at the time, but I wasn't really doing much.
No, I was in school, so I was actually here, Oregon College of Art and Craft. I was finishing my art degree, really, in photography at the time. But
that was actually going to be my question: was how the photography connection between you two happened.
It was kind of funny, Michael, because I was pretty embedded in the photo community after I got out of school, mostly because of publishing Diffusion and then having a few of my own solo shows recently. And then, this was like mid 2000s to late 2000s. So Harley came on my radar, like popped out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he was doing all this awesome photography. And I was like, what? I started seeing him at gallery openings. And it turns out he knew all the same people I knew. And I was like, what the
Yeah.
I thought you were an architect. When did you start doing photography?
I think a lot of that started with Ray Bittigan. The way I met Ray was my wedding photographer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We hired Ray when Carrie and I got married in 2002. And then years later when I had I'd always done a little bit of photography, but I always had a camera with me, but I never did anything very seriously. I traveled with a camera, but I didn't have any particular drive to do anything with it. And then when I met Ray, I had just gotten a little more serious and finally kind of went back and was doing some work I discovered medium format film through another friend, actually a landscape architect who knew a bunch of other architects that, again, this community of architects and stuff. We were talking one time, I was shooting a lot of film, a lot of digital photography and stuff, and was getting fed up with it. And I spend all my day behind a computer anyway. And I think that was part of the deal and then in all my spare time, I was sitting there on a computer too. And he saw the crap that I had, this gear that I would carry around with me when I would go places. He kind of was laughing at me and he says, "What are you doing, man?" I said, "I don't know. I like doing this stuff, but because I'm not having as much fun as I used to either. He goes, well, look at all the crap you're carrying around. Yeah, that's one thing. And then he said, well, have you ever shot medium format? And at the time I just said, I don't even know what medium format is. And he he went to a closet and pulled out a Mamiya 645 and a couple of rolls of film and handed it to me and said, why don't you go shoot this for a little while? So I took this camera from him, and like on the second roll of film, I remember probably taking a picture of my kids or something. I had snapped the shutter, and in that instant kind of knew whether or not somebody had blinked in the scene. You know, I wasn't checking some screen or something, and I was like, I remember what that was like when you just kind of knew if you got the shot or not. And after that, I was kind of like, well, okay, now there's something here. And so then I connected with Ray. I think he was doing a brown bag talk at the Portland Art Museum. I was like, I haven't seen Ray in years. Maybe I'll go see this talk. And so I went to that one lunch. And at the end of it, I almost left. But then I thought, I'll go up there and see if he even remembers me. And I walked up and said hi and reintroduced myself. And he goes, well, of course, Harley. I remember you. How you doing? You know, we just hit it off again. And next thing I knew, Ray started getting me busy, encouraging me to go out and do more. And he's got a whole community of photographers that he kind of does these get-togethers and that, and he was pulling me into these things. And before long, I started doing large format work and doing some workshops with him and stuff, and that's when things really started to get serious. But it was funny because, through Ray, I got to know a whole bunch of people around town, and that's how, all the same people that you know, Blue. Before long, you had Jake Shivery's book and that opening at New Space, and I showed up at that. And I think that was one of those moments where it was like, what are you doing here? and our mutual friend Brent, the interior designer, he was there, and it's just kind of funny. It's just two separate worlds that kind of overlapped.
Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting too, that you, it's one of the things that I hear quite a bit. Anybody who hadn't actually gotten into photography in a serious way before digital, and then they did pick it up, and digital means was the norm, a lot of people became disillusioned very quickly with photography because of that. Especially if they had a job, a 9-to-5 job where they were spending a lot of time in front of a computer. They're like, well, I thought this was going to get me away from the monitor, and it's not.
Doing the opposite.
Yeah, so that always kind of gravitates a lot of people towards the film end of the photography spectrum. So, but then in large format too, you mentioned. I mean, that's kind of goes hand in hand with shooting architecture in general, anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
At least in a professional sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was one of the things at some point was kind of like, okay, if I want to do something, if I want to approach this with some sense of education or whatever you want to call it, with an educated eye, I didn't exactly want to go do architectural photography per se, but had gotten interested in historic preservation and actually went to a field school that University of Oregon puts on every year. That would have been 2016, I think. I had sort of gotten interested in this idea of some of the historic preservation photography work that started in the 30s and is still kind of going on, and wanted to learn kind of how to do that, because I thought, okay, here's an area where I understand the rules, like what you're trying to do to create a document, and what's important. I could look at a subject and look at it probably with a little more of a little more critically than some people might. So I thought, if there's any area that I'll probably be able to make some headway, this would probably be a good spot to start. And to do that, then you've got to be, working with a view camera and something with movements and learning how to do that. And there are plenty of, Ray and some others, that helped me figure out how to do all that stuff. And so it just seemed like the right way to kind of get into doing something that I can make a real contribution in terms of, I haven't gone to photography school. I didn't go, I don't have an MFA. I haven't done that route. I've gone to design school. I've got some things that lend themselves to doing smart visual work. This was an area where it seemed like, okay, I can make a lot of things come together here potentially. And then once I started using the 4x5 I absolutely loved it. In fact, I think maybe one of the things that's so cool about it is like the pace of it, and you just mentioned that, this idea of what's the process or what's all the work behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be disillusioned working on the computer all the time and all that. Even just the picture taking part, the large format work is, I find really fascinating because it's so slow and deliberate that, it's actually something I think initially I thought I wouldn't be interested in. Like it's just too slow or too,
mm-hmm. Well, there's a certain precision to it.
Yeah.
Right? Being an architect requires a fair amount of precision. And I think photographically in that same neighborhood, using large format offers that same kind of precision. Oftentimes these days, people aren't really using camera movements the way that we did, 20 or more years ago, when all professional architectural work was being done with a view camera. And now it's not again, but some people are, but it's a different thing. But
yeah.
Again, picking it up using film to offer up that kind of precision, you're kind of required to go that route.
Yeah, there's a lot about the analog side that I get a kick out of. I'm a kind of a science geek, so I love the chemistry aspect and just getting in and mixing reagents and seeing how things react and doing that side. That's always fun.
Well, you have like a laboratory background, right?
Today in architecture, what I do is I'm a laboratory planner, so I design science facilities for scientists, and most of that job is really kind of being the interpreter between the design team and the scientists and trying to be the translator between those two groups. And so the science fluency side is definitely a big part of my job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you walk in both worlds, so you're kind of the perfect intermediary.
And then that's the fun thing about photography, because it's all that, right? You can be very technical if you want to. You don't have to be. You can be, very creative. It has all these elements of art and science in it. So to me, that's the fun part about all of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm curious, Harley, going back to what you were talking about, how you got into this photo thing. From my impression of the whole situation, though, was you immediately folded into the local photo community. And I'm curious if that was on purpose or purely because of Ray's influence, or did you seek out this community that we have here in Portland specifically, or was that just your curiosity in learning? Like,
God, that's good. I don't know. It's probably a little bit of multiple things. I mean, I live here in Portland, so naturally that's going to be the place where I'm connecting with anybody if it's going to be anywhere. I mean, I guess not entirely, but Ray, like we said, Ray was certainly a big part of that, and Ray is a connector. He knows so many people, and so that was a big deal to kind of have him invite me into his circle of friends and artists. And somewhere along the lines, I met Ken Hawkins. He's great, and we just hit it off. And so we get together occasionally, and I think Ken was pretty instrumental in getting me a show at Camera Work Gallery at one point. And then, I think there's been some stuff through the Portland Art Museum, through the Brown Bag Group, just going out to different galleries and that. I met Ian Beckett because he was my darkroom teacher. He's now up at Blue Moon, but he was teaching, I think he still teaches at Clark Community College up in Vancouver. And he's been great. He's put me in touch with other people here and there. The folks at Blue Moon have been phenomenal. That's a whole community in and of itself, and it's a fun group of people. There's all these overlaps. So you meet somebody somewhere, you see them again somewhere else through another group. Well, just like we did, Blue. I mean, it's just kind of funny. It's not too big a town, right?
Right.
Outside of Portland, I don't know. I know a few people here and there, but they're mostly in that kind of Habs Hair, historic preservation world. So do you remember the article that came out a while back that was National Park Service advertising the next Ansel Adams job, that got all these replies. They were looking for the next heritage photographer for the Park Service. Well, Jared Ortiz is the guy that got that. I happened to go to a historic preservation conference in Virginia. And so I just looked him up, had some sort of connection with somebody in that department, figured out how to get in touch with him, and just said, hey, I'm kind of starting to do some of this work. I understand, you got the job and I'd love to meet you. And he was super great. So I just showed up at their building and came in, and we ended up spending an hour just chatting in his offices. And then he's been in touch ever since. Probably a year ago, he was down at Oregon Caves and invited me to come down and spend a weekend down there kind of shadowing him while he was documenting the chateau. And he's been phenomenal. And that's somebody I sought out. To answer your long roundabout way to come back to your question, but have I sought it out? Yeah, sometimes. It's kind of funny how you just reach out and people are generally open to that kind of thing. So it's fun to just see who you can connect with.
Right. Well, we talk about that a lot on the Diffusion Tapes. A lot of the photo world is about connection and community.
For sure.
I don't see you doing it for opportunity. You're doing it out of curiosity more than anything.
But I'm not opposed to the opportunity.
Well, of course, yeah. But it comes hand in hand. But you're not knocking on the door saying, "Hey, what can you do for me?"
No, you're right.
You know what I'm saying? There's a difference between saying, "Hey, I'm curious about what you do," versus what can you do for me? You know what I'm saying? There's definitely a difference there. Yeah.
And that's the other thing. There's so many ways that people do this. There's so many different approaches to photography. It kind of amazes me. It's easy to be curious about people, I think. I think there's so many creative people out there, and it's really fun to connect with people and just find out what they're about, what makes them tick. I mean, I'm sure that's part of why you guys do this show, right?
No,
I mean,
for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the educational aspect of it all is immense. I mean, like you said, like we're constantly learning from a photographic standpoint. Not everybody came from a background of photography like yourself. Sure. So, and how it was introduced into your life and how you kind of like merged those worlds together, I think is a really fascinating aspect.
Yeah. I think that there's something really interesting in these kind of spaces between different aspects of, so like architecture, photography, whatever, how those things interact is really interesting ground, right? And that you can apply that to anything. But I think you're right. It's these little spaces in between are kind of where there's the opportunity to create something.
Yeah, well, and that's also what I've noticed too, especially when I really got into photography from a fine art perspective, how close-knit and tight the Portland photography community in particular really was and continues to be. And like you said, like you've already name dropped like 20 people who you I mean, we got a lot of names to go over.
Oh shit, that sounds terrible.
But I mean that's you know. I mean, I say name drop because I hear people name drop all of the time from other types of work, but
you probably hear it a lot, Michael.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, all of those people, they all had a hand in, directing you into photography and helping you along the way. That's an aspect of community, but again, I think it's very much a Portland community. And I have to say, after looking at your website and kind of going through different bodies of work, in the amount of time that you've been there, I mean, I kind of assumed that you were born and raised in Portland because of the amount of work that you have done there in the different parts of the community that you've documented.
Once I started doing the historic preservation work, I found out there's a community there too. That's the other interesting thing. So again, like these overlaps and stuff, right? So there's a whole preservation community that I got involved with after this field school I talked about. That's an even more tight-knit community. And the cool thing about being somebody who does this type of documentary photography, there's a need for it. There's been a lot of attrition over the years, and there's not a lot of people necessarily doing this kind of work anymore. People that I met at this field school are constantly getting in touch and saying, hey, we've got another project, or we know somebody who has a project that, this building is going to get demolished. Can you come in here and photograph this before it gets torn down? That's been definitely instrumental in terms of the productivity, or being sort of prolific and getting some work done in terms of body of work around historic places. If it wasn't for this field school, and again, connecting with a number of people, I don't know that I would have that body of work at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then that's part of the opportunity aspect that you mentioned too.
For sure.
Harley, are when some of these opportunities come up, are you being asked to document this stuff for your personal work, or are people actually saying, hey, we'll pay you to document this stuff?
It's a little of everything, but like sometimes it's I might hear about something and then I'll try to push my way in, or I'll try to figure out how to get access so that I can photograph something. Especially if it's a demolition thing and nobody's really thought about this. That's happened a few times here in Portland. Sometimes it's a group who is trying to they have a need to document a building because it's a historic building, and then there's a Historic Preservation Act, so they're trying to satisfy their requirements because it fits within these guidelines that it has to be documented before it can be remodeled or torn down or whatever. Some of the people that I know from this field school now work as cultural heritage officers for ODOT, and so ODOT actually has sent me some work. They've hired me to go out and photograph some bridges before they've gotten demolished, and so
that's Oregon Department of Transportation.
Oregon Department of Transportation, right? Yeah. I had an artist residency with Oregon Caves, a National Park Service artist residency, and that was a couple of weeks down in Southern Oregon, going through the building and just documenting that as if it were a historic preservation project. It wasn't, although it was getting ready to be remodeled, this chateau down there.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so did you get inside the chateau?
Yeah, so when I went down there, the chateau was still operating as a hotel.
Oh.
It was built in the 30s and had been operating up through, I think that was 2018. And so I was there, I think, a month before it closed for renovation. So that was this artist residency. They put me up. They didn't pay anything, but they put me up, and you got to interact with people who were visiting the park and kind of explain the camera and what the process is. What are you doing? When that was over, they shut down for the season. The building started to be renovated. And then the firm that was doing the renovation work was a group of preservationists that I know from Portland. And so I applied to do the actual work, the actual documentation work for that building. Long story short, Park Service, whoever was in charge of the renovation, they kicked the decision up to their Denver office, who said, we don't know who this guy is, and so we're going to send it to DC and have the Park Service folks out of DC do this. A couple months later, that's when Jared Ortiz, again, gave me a call and said, hey, I'm going to be down in Oregon. I'm doing this documentation project. And I said, yeah, I know. I applied to do that job. He goes, you did? well, come down here and you can, let's hang out and you can follow me around. So then I showed up down there, and then there were a couple of people like, oh, wait a minute. What are you doing down here? I thought we told you that we were hiring someone else. It's like, yeah, he asked me to come and hang out with him for the weekend.
That's funny.
That's interesting. One of the things I also discovered in your website, and I think it kind of falls in line with what we've been talking about. What is the Atomic Photographers Guild? And that's fascinating to me. Something like that even exists. I mean, I just love the name, but I'm sure what you're doing there.
No, I thought that shit was made up, honestly.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Eastern Washington, in the Tri-Cities in Richland. So that's where the Hanford Reservation is. In fact, my high school job was working for a company that made reactor fuel. Was in a laboratory analyzing uranium oxide pellets we worked in a production lab where we were handling uranium every day, and
Like you do.
Like you do. Flip burgers, handle uranium, whatever your school job is. Anyway, growing up around that, I knew a fair amount about the Hanford Reservation and the history with the Manhattan Project and all that. So later on, in recent history, when I started getting interested in this historic documentation stuff, that was the first place I wanted to go. Of all the places I could go, I wanted to go out to B reactor at Hanford. This is the world's first full-size nuclear reactor. And I kind of was petitioning Department of Energy and trying to figure out how to get in and do this, and was kind of getting nowhere. And again, it goes back to this this preservation field school I went to. While I was at this field school that was up in Mount Rainier, and we were doing, it was like a week at camp kind of for grown-ups. We're camping in tents. We're at the headquarters of Mount Rainier working on an old CCC cabin, like replacing windows and replacing wood beams in the building and stuff. And it was super fun. And they had these people that would come in and out during the week and give lectures, and stuff. And you were supposed to have your 30-second, elevator speech about who you were. And there was this guy that showed up from the Park Service out of the Seattle office. And we were talking, and I explained, oh, yeah, this is who I am. I'm an architect, but I do this kind of photography, and right now I'm trying to get into Hanford, do some stuff with the Manhattan Project stuff there. And he kind of pauses for a minute and looks at me, and he goes, wait a minute. And it turns out that somebody at Department of Energy had kicked my request letter up to his desk in the Seattle office for the Park Service.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, and we just happened to, he happened to be there the week I was there. It was just random, completely random. He said, well, let's talk tomorrow before I leave. And so the next day we chatted, and I think he kind of was like, okay, you grew up there, you know what this is all about, and you're not a nut job. So well, he goes, I think we could probably make this work. And he left, and I thought, oh, right, this is fantastic. And then I never heard anything for months and months. And then finally, probably 4 or 5 months later, I got a call and said, if you want to come and do this, you need to come out in 2 weeks, and you've got 4 days.
Whoa. Oh, wow.
So I was like, okay, now I got to figure out how the hell to do this. And I mean, the 4x5 camera was pretty new to me at this point. I'd used it, I'd shot some stuff with it and that, but I've never done a real documentation project. I think in 4 days I shot about 180 sheets of film.
Nice.
And just worked every day. It was so much fun.
Harley, since you were relatively new to the 4x5, were you like doing bracketed shots?
A little bit. Felt pretty comfortable with like figuring out my exposures, metering a scene, and doing that work. I would.
So what he's saying, Michael, is he's a natural.
Yeah, total natural. It was super easy. Didn't even take that long, really.
And also, he was new at it, so he had no idea if he was making a mistake or not.
Well, this is the thing. It's like
it's a trial by fire, right?
A little bit. It was. I'm this stupid guy that took on this giant documentation project and really had no idea what I'd bitten off. I just kind of winged it and did it, and things worked out for the most part. I was too stupid to know how big a project it was.
Right, but that's kind of the way it had to go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they had to. Like you said, you waited for months and months, and then all of a sudden the phone rings and they say go.
Part of it too was I think I had to buy a few more, but I had like 30 film holders. So it's like I could go out and do a day's work, and that's all the film I could shoot. So I had to shoot, this much every day or whatever,
right.
Whatever it was.
That's great. Again, how did the name come up, the Atomic Photographers Guild?
Oh, sorry. That's right. That's how we started on this.
Yeah, let's not get too off topic here. Let's stick to my questions, please.
After I did that project, I got contacted by somebody, a guy in Chicago. He was with this Photographers Guild, and kind of, I think they wanted to use one of my pictures, and then he was talking about, you might petition the group to see if if they would accept you. This guild was started in the 80s. It was Robert Del Tredici who had a photo book called At Work in the Fields of the Bombs. he had done a bunch of photojournalism about 3 Mile Island and some other stuff. And then he started this group, and then they, over the years, have added some photographers here and there. So they've, some National Geographic photographers who did work in Chernobyl, some folks that, all over the world, anything that had to do with nuclear weapons, nuclear energy. And so I sent in some of these pictures, and they really liked. They asked if I wanted to be part of the group and be represented on their website and that. So I did, and I think I think there's less than 40 people in this group.
Well, it's a pretty niche.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Nerds.
Totally.
That's what this is.
Total nerds.
But in only the finest way.
Yes.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's good to know that you didn't just make this up. I mean,
No. It's
because it does. It sounds kind of like that's not a real thing, right? Come on. But it really is. I mean, it's actually very serious.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds better to me than award-winning photographer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, anybody that uses
run across
line,
that a few times. Yeah.
I knew a guy that called himself world-renowned.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, I like it.
When he first designed his website, the very first thing it said is world-renowned photographer. And I'm not going to say his name because he might hear this.
That's awesome.
You just came back from a trip.
Yeah.
Like, what, a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So this was, I think you need to tell us a little bit about it, because we both checked out your Instagram, and there's some pretty amazing photos going on there.
Thanks. It was crazy. It was an artist residency. It's called the Arctic Circle. I think it's been around for at least 10 years, maybe a little longer. Started by a Canadian named Aaron O'Connor, who still manages it. And so the idea is you have to apply. It's competitive, but they do 2 trips a year, one in June and one in the fall. And you go up to Svalbard, which is a island group north of Norway. It's about halfway between the top of Norway and the North Pole. And you spend about 3 weeks sailing on a tall ship. And
Wow.
I applied to this thing like 3 years ago, in 2019, I think, and was accepted for 2021. And then the pandemic had other ideas. So it's been like 3 years since getting the acceptance until now. So I just got back from it. I was up there for most of October. Yeah, we had this. It was incredible. The ship is a 3-masted tall ship. It's a Dutch ship. There were, I think, 27 of us that were in the program. And then they have, between guides and sailors and ship's crew, they had probably about a dozen people running the ship and the program. For me, I was doing photography, of course, but I brought the 4x5 with me. So I was doing large format film, and then I set up a darkroom on the ship. So I was developing as we went.
Wow.
And we had kind of a spectacular trip because they don't have a set itinerary. It kind of depends on what the conditions are or what, So when we set out, they started looking at the weather, and we had these incredibly good winds that were going to be able to take us all the way up to the north and to the northeast, which above 80 degrees latitude, to a few places that we had no right to expect to ever get to. They were too far away for the time that we were traveling, and we made it up to this northeast corner of the island in a couple of days. And every day was, you get up, have breakfast, there'd be a meeting, they'd talk about where we were, and you'd have a landing, we'd get in Zodiacs and go out and land on a shore or an island, or sometimes just out in front of a glacier. You'd have most of the morning to work, and we had people that were doing all kinds of projects. There were definitely some photographers around doing different things, but there were also sound artists that were doing cool stuff, hydrophones, and one guy that had an infrasound project where he was recording all these slow grinding sounds that are way below your hearing level that you have to speed up just to hear. We had poets and writers, just all sorts of people doing all sorts of different projects, and it was a blast. Every day was something brand new. Colony of walruses, old. We had one beach we landed on one morning that had The guides had never found it before. They'd heard about it, and we all kind of found it together, which was kind of cool because most of the places we went to, these guides that we were with had visited them at least once or twice before. There's this one beach where there's an expedition in 1898, a Swedish expedition that was measuring the curvature of the globe. They, on the beach, had spelled out in stones the name of the expedition and the date, and it's still sitting there on the beach. So,
What?
Oh, cool.
yeah, 1898. Yeah,
Wow.
and it's protected. You're not supposed to touch it in this, but you can walk all around it. And that was just one morning. Every morning was like this. It was something different every day, and it was just nuts. It was incredible.
That's incredible. Was it freezing cold at that time already, or no?
Yeah, it was. When we started out, it wasn't too bad, but I think when I left, it was about 15, 16 degrees, something like that.
Sure. Did that present some challenges with making photographs?
I was worried. I was so worried about that. In fact, Jake Shivery and I talked about that a lot because Blue Moon helped me get my film supplies up to Svalbard, and we were talking about shutters and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Do I need to get new lubricants for the shutters? Do I need to do this, that? Ultimately, we didn't. I had a Hasselblad kit with me too, which I hardly touched while I was there, and the large format camera just worked like a champ. Like it did not care at all. The worst days, it was no problem. It didn't seem to matter which lens, whether I was using a more modern lens or I think I pulled an old Ektar lens off of a Crown Graphic, and I had some more modern Nikkor lenses, and different size shutters, and none of them had any problem.
Right. It's nice to know they have that kind of resiliency against
the
cold. That's great. Well, one of the things I also noticed too, upon looking at the images on your Instagram, because again, like you don't have these they're not on your website.
Not yet. No, in fact, I'm still scanning some of the negatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because there were a couple of images in particular of the ship itself and the distance, and you see that, and then there's a picture of you with a view camera and your beard, and and the first thing I thought is, my God, he went back in time. I mean, it literally looks like it was if you had taken a photograph around those stones with that date, everybody would have just said, "Oh yeah, that's when he did it."
It felt like it. It was. I mean, part of the fun of that was, it's residency, so you get to do whatever you want, right? Like that's the whole point, is to just kind of, run naked through the park. It's like you can do whatever you want. What's going to be cool? And so it was like, well, I'm not shooting glass plate or anything like that, but I was kind of interested to see what would it be like to just, play Herbert Ponting or Frank Hurley or whatever, and like just set up a large format camera and shoot it and develop it,
Yeah, especially on the ship like that.
Yeah. It was so cool. It was hard to because we basically took one cabin. We had one cabin on the ship that was a project cabin, and so anybody could use it for their projects. And there, as it turned out, there wasn't supposed to be anybody in there, but we had one person that switched rooms, and so we had a person we were kind of working around who was staying in that cabin too. And these cabins aren't big. They're like 2 bunks and a little wall-hung sink and a toilet and shower, and they're tiny. And I brought along a little dark tent, with the sleeves. Mm-hmm. So that was how I did all the film changing. And then I brought some Patterson tanks and like a Mod 54, so I could do the sheet film development in a tank. So I didn't have to, do tray development or something where I had to darken up the whole room or anything.
Oh, that makes sense.
And that worked out pretty well. And then we had to collect all the effluent and stuff, all the spent chemistry. We just collected it all, and so that we could dispose of it properly later.
You can't just dump it over the side of the ship.
No, I mean, we probably, realistically, we were using some pretty mild stuff. I think it was HC-110 and some pretty dilute fixture that we were stretching out. And I had steel wool for the fixer, so I could, the dissolved silver in it. And we kind of had a plan to try to make it as, the least impact possible.
Sure.
We still collected it in jugs, and then when we got back, it went to the big disposal facility that deals with all that kind of stuff.
Right. Was it so remote that it didn't seem like there were any kind of signs of previous people in the area or anything? Like, you're not like walking along a glacier and like, is that a Snicker wrapper on the ground? Like, did somebody left behind? Or
yeah,
are there a lot of signs of
No,
people?
Once we left the main town, we didn't see another ship or another person the entire 3 weeks we were sailing.
Wow.
We were totally on our own. There's no cell phone, of course. There was a satellite phone for an emergency, but we didn't have access to that. So it was just your little world on the ship. And everywhere we landed, we saw some wildlife. There were reindeer and there were walruses, and we saw a polar bear, Arctic fox, but no people.
Did they hold still for you?
The polar bear was pretty far off. We were going to have a landing, and we couldn't land that day because there's a polar bear on the shore. And so we all watched him from the ship. I tried to take some pictures with a telephoto lens of the Hasselblad, but I don't think it turned out all that great. So
they won't even let you go because there's a polar bear.
Yeah. In fact, it's illegal to walk around on land if you don't have a gun. You have to have so yeah.
Wow.
Except for the main town. If you're strictly within the city, the limits of the town, you can walk around without one. But anywhere else on the entire island, if you're going to be on land, you have to have a rifle and a flare gun. The way it worked for us was that was what our guides were for. So every time we landed, the guides would go check it out first. They would come back, pick us up in the Zodiacs, bring us out to the landing spot. And it was usually a couple Zodiac trips to get everybody on shore. We'd all have to wait in one spot, and then the guides would spread out and set up a perimeter. And then they would sit around this perimeter and just keep an eye on the landscape, and we could work for the next couple hours, and we'd all, go back to the ship. But you had to have these people with guns, standing around keeping an eye out for you.
Yeah, that's nice. You were able to just, basically you send out guinea pigs ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Check it out. If you heard a blood-curdling scream, let's not go today.
Yeah. One thing we did see, we didn't see people, but every beach that we landed on, I think pretty much every place we landed, we found plastic.
Wow.
That was everywhere. We tried to collect some of it and take it back and get rid of it.
Yeah. See, that's what I was talking about. Like, is there, kind of depressing end of it is like you're in this beautiful remote location and then there's like a water bottle on the ground.
Yeah. No, it was stunning. It was amazing. It was desolate and isolated. But yeah, there was some kind of plastic everywhere we went.
Wow. Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, sorry to end on a downer there.
Yeah.
Reality check.
Yeah. We discovered that there used to be a lot of dicks around this place.
Harley, my wife had a question for you then.
Oh, yeah?
Related to that. You were on the boat 3 weeks, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what did you miss most while you're on the boat, like creature comforts from home? You can't say your family because that's just a cop-out.
Well, okay, fair enough. Although, yeah, it was nice to get home to the family. Gosh, creature comforts. I don't know. It was great. We got treated very well. We got fed well. We got, we had.
Did you have bourbon?
Yeah, we had a full bar.
Okay, good.
We had a keg of beer so you could pour a draft beer most any time, and had a full bar, and it was definitely wasn't roughing it in that sense. I guess a little personal space is probably one of the things. I mean, I got lucky. I had a really good roommate, and we got along great. And it's funny, like you're in a small community, and I think a lot of people realize that, and they're on their best behavior. But then you always have a couple of people that are kind of like, don't realize, hey, look, you gotta, maybe this is a little uncomfortable, or maybe this is, not how you do it at home, but just, take a breath.
Yeah. Well, how big is that ship?
What did they say? Probably about 160, 170 feet long. So we were doubled up in the cabins. I think there were about 16 cabins on the ship, 2 persons per. And then they had, of course, in addition to that, they had stuff for crew. That was just the kind of the guest cabins. And they had a kind of this big room that was the galley and where you spent most of your time. We ate all our meals there, but it was also kind of set up to 3 big tables and plenty of place to work. And they had a deck house. It was like a little separate building on the main deck that you could sit in. Or it was usually great to be out on deck as we were sailing. It was a little cold, but we're all wearing warm gear. So that was the other. You had to bundle up. So it wasn't like home where you can just kind of step outside.
Sure. Yeah.
What else did I miss? I don't know, Lou.
A heated toilet seat? You can say nothing.
Yeah, I didn't miss shit.
I personally, I think it would be very freeing that you wouldn't have cell phone reception or TV or anything like that, right?
Didn't miss that.
I mean, it was like, in a sense, it's, it's your work 24/7, and you're also learning so much. I mean, the conversations that you must have had around the dinner table with people, with such a wide range of interesting people doing interesting things, that I would think you would, take a lot of that home as a really valuable experience.
Absolutely. No, it was a fun group of people. Everybody had a good sense of humor for the most part. We all got along great. At the end of the trip, we had there was a historian who was talking about Arctic expeditions usually had like these they put on a show, like a talent show, so to speak, tell stories, tell jokes, perform something, sing a song, whatever people wanted to bring to it. And so we did this at the end of the trip. We decided to do this on the ship, and everybody was gung-ho about it and participated, and it was a total blast. I think there were a number of people that would probably there were some people who worked together to do some artwork on the trip and would probably continue to do that afterwards. One of the funny ones for me was we had a young woman who was related to her name's Jessica Crean, and she was related to Thomas Crean, who was on the Endurance with Shackleton in that Antarctic voyage that went bad. They all survived. So, but he was you might have seen a picture of him. He's the guy who was holding 4 of these sled dog puppies on the ship. And it's a Frank Hurley picture. And so we were talking about this. We had a dog on the ship. We had this full-grown husky that went with us. It belonged to one of the guides. So Jessica was like, "Do you think can we recreate this picture?" Well, sure, why not? I mean, we got you, we got a dog, we got a wooden door because he's sitting in front of a wooden door. We got a large format camera, why not? And so we took a picture of her holding the one dog, the big dog, and I brought 200 sheets of film with me on this trip, and I shot all but 2 of them by the time I got done. And this was like one of the last sittings of the trip, so I had I think I shot 2, and one of them the dog moved in, and one of them he didn't. So we got one shot at it, and it turned out looks pretty close to the original photo. Normally I wouldn't do, parody another, or try to mimic another photographer's work like that. But this was kind of a funny, opportunity to do something, just for kicks. And it was fun. It turned out great.
That's great. So you really kind of had to ration yourself, I guess, a bit.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was probably, roughly 10, 12 sheets a day.
That's not much.
No.
Were you the lazy one then? You're like, that guy took 10 pictures today. What the hell? Like, we're out here all day long busting our ass, and that guy took 10 pictures.
Yeah. Early on, I was having some trouble. There's another guy from California, Osceola, who was doing a lot of infrared work digitally and stuff. But it was funny because we would always kind of see the same thing every time we would land. We'd be setting up in the same spot. It was great. And the first day, things just weren't working. Sometimes things weren't coming together, and I was starting to have those doubts, like, oh, why did I do it this way? Why did I decide to go with a large format camera? Why is this going to be a waste of 3 weeks? I can't. I was putting all this pressure on myself, and so I was talking with him, and he kind of pulled me out of my funk and just said, look, hey, think about this. You got, however many more days, 14 more days or whatever, how many more days it is. what if you came away with one shot for each one of those days that was decent? That would be a nice portfolio of work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And he goes, and the minute you think about it like that, you're gonna probably come up with more than one a day that's decent, that you're gonna be happy with, and you'll have some that'll be really good, but that would be a decent body of work. And it was just the right thing to kind of say, you know what? Okay, chill out. This is not insurmountable. This was not a stupid idea. This is get that one shot each day. And so that kind of became the goal. And then, the minute you're able to see something again, you're out there and you're kind of not getting frustrated. You're actually seeing some things. Well, then you see more and more and more. And so it was good. It could have gone bad. I could have gotten in one of those ruts where you just get discouraged and can't quite find a way out of it. And fortunately, it didn't last long.
And I'm sure there's probably more than meets the eye out there. It's like you look out the window every day and you just go, oh, look, snow. Great. But there's way more out there than you would ever imagine.
It was pretty cool. I mean, sometimes there were some days where it felt like it doesn't matter where I point this thing. You're going to be pointing it at something interesting. Other times it's kind of like, I've seen a dozen glaciers. Now I'm up, is the 13th one going to look that much different than, but then it does. Like you get out there and there's something crazy going on. And
yeah, those scenes don't get old.
No,
not that fast.
So Harley, I know you're looking at you're talking about one shot, but I'm looking at your Instagram and the stuff that you have shared publicly, and it's all just phenomenal work. So I'm curious, what are you going to do with this? Do you have a vision?
Not really.
Are you still just soaking it in, still?
You should start a guild.
That's what I need to do. I need to start a new guild.
The Arctic Photographers Guild. Of course.
Oh my God, that's great. That's great. Why didn't I think of that?
How many people are in it? Me. That's it.
Only one so far, but
We're taking applications.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to do with it. I mean, I'd love to exhibit some of this stuff. I haven't even printed anything yet though. So I'm still trying to scan negatives but I think there's some of them it'll be exciting to print.
Would you publish it in a magazine?
Yeah. I mean, I'm open to anything. Part of it is sometimes I feel like, sometimes, what was I trying to say?
We know some people.
Good. Because this is where I need some help.
I mean, what we've seen on the Instagram, I mean, it's like Blue was saying, I mean, it's incredible. And the story behind it is equally as incredible. So, I mean, I think that offers up really great article for other photographers, especially from an inspirational standpoint. I mean, to go someplace like that with a large format camera to a lot of people, that's just like, I'm sorry, that's too daunting of anything for me. So, but you get to go back in time like you did and make it happen. I mean, you walked away with some really amazing images, and I mean, personally, I'm excited to see more of what's to come.
The idea of going off and doing something like this, it was either going to turn out all right or it was going to be a really big disaster.
Those are the best projects. Yeah. All or nothing.
Yeah. No, it was super fun. I'm glad, looking back on it, I talked with several people. I talked with, Jake, I talked with Ray. I bounced this idea off of multiple photographers and kind of said, look, I'm thinking at one point I thought I was just going to do everything medium format. I knew I wanted to shoot film. I knew I wanted to do that. I wanted to try to develop it. But I thought, maybe this would just be better trying to, shoot roll film and be able to be a little more flexible, have some lens choices, whatever. Mm-hmm. Jake was kind of like, why would you do that? It's like, that's not what you do. Why would you do that? I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm trying to figure out the logistics. Wait, no, why would you do that? It kind of kept coming back to that and just saying, and it was totally right. It's like, this is your opportunity to do what you like to do or what you're good at. It's an artist residency, so it's not a project. You don't have a deliverable that you have to come up with for some client. You do your thing. The one chance I'll probably ever have to do something that crazy. So
Right.
Why not?
And you have those large format negatives. I mean, you can do something different if you want after the fact, because those negatives offer you a lot of flexibility.
That's true too.
That you would not have with, or that wouldn't be as easy to make happen with with something else, especially as a smaller negative or digital for that matter.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't thought about leading up to it either. And you're totally right. Like after the fact, it does offer a lot.
Right. I mean, all the different printing choices and things that you could try out with that. So, and I mean, imagery like that really kind of lends itself to things like platinum palladium printing or something, for instance.
Totally.
So anyway. So I'm not telling you what to do. Or
No.
I'm just saying that really the imagery itself really kind of fits that mold to a certain degree.
The platinum palladium stuff is an area I haven't gotten into yet, but know a number of people who do, and it's something I think that I would like to try at some point here. And this might be the avenue to do that. I'll definitely be printing silver gelatins of this stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm excited about the possibilities of those prints. Those could be really nice.
Do you do any toning of your prints?
I usually do. I'm usually doing fiber prints I'm using Ilford stuff, multigrade, and then I'll usually selenium tone them, but not too heavy. Part of that comes out of that whole Habs Hair historic preservation stuff. The guidelines there's like some really strict guidelines about how you have to do the film for those projects. So I've kind of just gotten into that routine. You have to hand develop everything. You can't use a machine for any of the development because it's not archival. And then when you do your contact printing and stuff, you have to selenium tone. And anyway, so that's kind of become my routine for any of the silver gelatin printing is to just follow that. And what was I going to say? I don't know where I was going with that.
It was all downhill, I could tell.
Yeah, I think we're breaking down fast. I think this is almost over, man. No, I'm kidding.
Do you still have? Do you have a darkroom at the house still?
Mm-hmm. When you dropped off the gear, I should have shown you. Yeah, I've got downstairs. We had this funny little space. We've got the set of stairs that goes down, and then we have this vestibule that was like, I don't know, 7-8 feet square, and then there was a bathroom beyond that. It's basically just this dead space to get into a closet. Several years ago, I just decided to build a wall and put a door in it, and I turned it into the dark room. So it was kind of like space that wasn't being used for anything, which was kind of great. And then the bathroom was kind of I got a stainless steel sink. It's been phenomenal. Having the facility at home is totally key. It's like playing music or something. You got an instrument. If you leave it in the case or something, you never play it. If you leave it out, in the room, you'll pick it up all the time. Having the dark room and being able to walk in anytime I want to is totally key, especially for, I've got a day job, so I'm busy with family and with the job and all this kind of stuff. So I don't really have a lot of spare time. If I want to do this stuff and kind of be serious and keep being productive and all that, that's a big key to making it happen.
Makes sense. So Harley, before we wrap things up, what's this film that Corey Kaufman did with you?
Corey, we met here. Our kids go to the same school. That's how I ran into him. So he lives a few blocks from me, and he's went to college for studying film, but he doesn't do that as his job. Kind of like me, he's been trying to do some of this stuff in his spare time. At one point, he asked if he could just and take some video of me while I was documenting a place. And I was working on the Multnomah County Courthouse downtown Portland. I'd gotten a grant to do some work documenting some places around Oregon. And I was like, yeah, come in. I've got this building. I can kind of go anywhere I want in the building. There's a jail. There's, all these courtrooms, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, come on in with me. And so he shadowed me for a couple of days there. And then he said, hey, I think we could turn this into a little documentary, and we decided to make it the final report for this grant. Oh, that's maybe better than trying to write a report or put together some kind of document for this. It's like, let's just do this little film. So then we started doing some B-roll stuff. I had a picture of Bybee Howell, this old house out on Soviet Island. So we went back out there, and he wanted to set your camera up. We'll take a picture of you, and then we'll try to, show it and the house, the final result. And he had this vision for this piece and that piece. So we filmed a couple other things, and he put together an 8-minute short film. Next thing you know, he entered it into the Portland Film Festival, and it got accepted and was one of the Oregon shorts. So that was kind of cool. And then we were having a beer one time talking, and I said, well, what's next for you? And he goes, well, I don't know, but with this film, he goes, I kind of like to, what I would really, the claim to fame I'd love to have is to have this thing play out in the Hollywood Theater micro cinema out at the airport. You know what I'm talking about? The Hollywood Theater, this historic theater in Portland, has a little mini theater out in the Portland airport, and you can just walk in anytime, and they show mini documentaries about Oregon, and it changes quarterly. It's super cool. It's just like this random thing. It's so Portland, right? So he was talking about this. I said, well, why not? He was like, well, how would I make that happen? I said, well, I don't know, but it would be fun. I'd thought about maybe submitting some photos to the rotating art program out there. They have this great rotating art program at the Portland airport. Usually it's pretty well-established people get into that. But I said, well, here's an idea. What if we submit a joint submission? Why don't you submit to Hollywood Theater? I'll submit to the rotating art program, and we'll CC the other group. Just see what, let's just see if they're interested. Turns out they had been looking for something. They've been wanting to pair up these two programs for a long time and had never found the right thing. And we just kind of came along at the right time. So it's the first time that they've ever paired up the art program and the movie theater out there. And so, Wendy Given, Wendy's in charge of the art program out there, and she's awesome. We were talking when we were putting up the photography in the airport. I said, it's my family's not going to be able to see it. Well, eventually we did because we went on a trip, but it's behind security. It's like you can't send anybody out there to say, hey, go check out my exhibit, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, this is great. I love having this exhibit out here, but it's just kind of too bad you can't send anybody out there. I had more people see that exhibit than everything else I've done combined. It's just kind of crazy. It's like,
thousands of people walk by it every day, probably.
Yeah, but people I know, it's kind of funny. It's like I've had people come up to me. It seems like weekly. There's somebody, hey, just saw your photos, or posting an Instagram picture of it or something. And
well, how long does it stay up?
This, I think, this comes down in December, so soon, in a couple of weeks probably.
Well, how long does it run though?
It was up July, so it's like 6 months.
6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. It's like a permanent exhibit, Harley.
Yeah. No, it's been great.
And then on top of that, you're a film star. So
yeah. And then I get to,
local boy does good.
Local boy does good. Totally.
That's going to be our subtitle of this episode.
When my family was out there, we were going through the airport, and we go into the movie theater with the kids, and it's kind of funny because it's not big. There's 14, 16 seats in this little theater, but the screen's pretty big. And my head on this giant screen, it's like, oh God.
Larger than life.
Yeah, it's hard to see yourself, right?
It's a little intense.
Yeah.
It seems like I think everything that I've seen with you, or the majority of everything I'd seen from you, is black and white. Was that a choice you made early on, or is that just simply what you prefer? I mean, or is there some color work that maybe we haven't seen that you've done in the past?
Yeah, I've done some color work in the past. Not a lot, but a little bit here and there. I definitely like shooting black and white. I really like silver gelatin. As a medium, I think it's just it just suits me really well. I like the fact that it's an abstraction, but it's it's an abstraction that everybody believes.
Right.
It's very factual as an abstraction. It's kind of funny. That just kind of fascinates me a little bit. There's also a practical choice. I mean, it's, again, I've got the darkroom at home. I can do this. I can do the analog stuff that I want to do just because I like the process. I like being hands-on. I like, not being in front of the computer screen, whatever. Yeah, I could get into color, and maybe at some point I could be doing that at home as well. I don't know. It's I haven't gotten tired of doing silver gelatin. There's plenty to explore there, and I've really gotten into making prints. Like, I didn't know if printing was going to be one of the things that I was going to get jazzed about. Most people, you get into photography because you're into composition, or you're into, you want to create, but maybe the printing side itself isn't exactly the first thing that you gravitate toward. Mm-hmm. I've been pleasantly surprised with how much I like the printing process and really getting into manipulating the print and making something. I think you try to prevision stuff and you try to have a sense of what you're going for, but you never know exactly how it's going to end up. There's so much that you can do in the darkroom to refine a print. It's just kind of fascinating to me.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the work that you've done really lends itself to working in black and white as well.
Yeah, I think,
and you really excel at it. I mean, it's obvious to see that there's a lot of, like, again, we kind of go back to the word precision. There's a lot of precision in what it is that you're doing. There's a high degree of expertise and quality in everything that you've done that I've seen. So,
well, thanks.
Yeah, the same too, Michael, as for his printing. Is great. Yeah, phenomenal.
You do it for the right reasons, Mm-hmm. I got into this for chicks, but other people have far better reasons to get into photography.
I think it's working though. It must be working.
Yeah.
For you,
oh yeah.
Chick,
yeah, they're everywhere
over there.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
It's good stuff. Well, I can agree with the darkroom though, because I'd taken photos and I didn't really fall in love with photography until I took a darkroom class in college, and it was like, okay, now I'm totally hooked. And it was because of that darkroom experience of being able to, like, so I'm sort of the opposite when it comes to the technical. Like, I just wanted to fuck up the picture as much as possible to see what I could do to it. Like, I was not this pristine guy. I was like, no, forget all that. How could I push the darkroom? How could I push the medium in the darkroom? And that's why I fell in love with it. So it's very similar as, like, that process of, like, creating the print. Plus, my negatives sucked, as a student, so I didn't have very good negatives. So, you just work with what you got, right?
Totally.
Right.
But I made some great work, and I got super inspired, and I think it helped that, other people seemed to like what I was doing, and it was like, yeah, man, the darkrooms, that's the shit.
And that's the thing I was saying earlier. It was like, you can take it so many different directions, and, everybody has a different point of view. It's why it's so interesting to talk to people. It's just like architecture. It's like, you can say less is more. You can say less is a bore. It's and neither one is right or wrong.
So if I was in architecture, can I just go and fuck shit up? Would that work too?
Totally. Yeah. There are some people that do that, and some people that, not a lot of them that do it successfully, but there are some.
Yeah. I mean, you can always fall back on, I meant to do that.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. No matter how bad it turns out. Well, that's what I was going for. I don't care if you like it or not. That's what I wanted to do.
That was my artistic liberty I took right there. Yeah, I like it. Well, Harley, do you have anything else you want to share, or are you feeling good about this?
This is great.
We've been going for an hour and a half. That's pretty good.
Wow. We have. Yeah. That's fantastic. Now this is.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut most of what you said out.
Oh, that's fair enough. I expected that.
Yeah, that conversation between Blue and Michael was great. There was another guy there, but we didn't hear much from him.
Hi.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like time flies when you're in the midst of a great conversation. So.
Yeah,
This is a blast.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. This is so much fun, and I do like the chemistry you guys have got going on here. It's pretty great. It's pretty great.
I feel like people who have been doing this for decades, sometimes some of them can't do it quite as well as somebody like Harley, who came at it later, but is making great images with a large format camera and making intelligent silver prints in the darkroom. I mean, how great is that?
I think that's a testament to his passion for craft, and I think he's always been like that. You know, when it comes to his architecture and some of the stuff we talk about in the talk, is he actually designs like science laboratories. That's one of his specialties. So he's got like some niches, and it's the same thing with the photographs. He kind of found a very specific thing that he's doing, almost like a niche. The fact that he is one of the 30 some odd atomic photographers in the Atomic Photographers Guild shows you, it tells you a lot about his niche. Right?
I'm still not sold that this is a real thing. I believe him, but come on. I believe you, but you're drunk.
Yeah. Oh, one of my favorite parts of our talk was at one point he was kind of like rattling off all these folks and influences, and then you mentioned something about like, oh man, you just name dropped like 30 people, and he got kind of embarrassed, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
he's like, oh my god, I can't believe I just name dropped all those people. I'm like, yep, and we're publishing that shit.
Exactly. He built himself up over time, so I figure, why not knock him down a peg?
Right, exactly. That's what we do here on the Diffusion Tapes.
Keeping people honest.
Keeping it real.
I mean, clearly, like from the get-go, talking to Harley, like you immediately know, like, oh yeah, this guy's one of the good ones. Like,
yeah.
You know, he's just an easy person to talk to. And he's got a good beard, which is helpful. Yeah. Like, it'd be great. I'd like to grow a beard like Harley someday.
Well, it's really, at this point, it's part of his identity. In fact, I saw an older photo of him without a beard, and I was like, whoa, seems weird.
Yeah. Now you look stupid. No, you don't look stupid, but the beard suits him. And
it does. Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about too is, again, it was on his Instagram. There was a portrait that somebody had made of him standing, like he's fully in like the winter clothes in the Arctic Circle, standing next to a large format 4x5 camera.
Yep.
And the ship that he's sailing on is like in the water, like way behind him. And it looks like this guy just traveled through time to be here with us. He could be like 1890 for all we know.
All right. Oh yeah. It's completely timeless.
Yeah. Yep. He completely fits into that. Like he could be the world's greatest time traveler.
Maybe he is, and we're just figuring it out.
Maybe he is. Maybe he is. Like it's one of those things. Like you would see, you come across an old photograph of this guy standing next to a camera in front of a ship, and the people would say, "The picture's from 1892."
Yeah,
and then you would look closer, and there would be an iPhone in his hand, and you would be like, "What the fuck?
What the fuck?
What?" That's hard.
Yeah. Speaking of the time travel thing, also makes me think like his something about one of the themes that I like. Well, it's not really related to time travel, but I couldn't segue it, so whatever. The other thing. Go ahead. Keep on going with this.
I was going to say, like we were talking about how he just jumped in to photography and made it work, and he's doing an amazing job at it. And it reminded me of that. I don't know, was it from the 90s? What was that company? No Fear. Remember those?
Yeah.
Like people would have t-shirts and stickers, bumper stickers.
Yeah.
No Fear. Like if they're still around, like shouldn't they sponsor him?
Totally.
Like he would bust through a wall like the Kool-Aid guy, but he would have like a No Fear sticker on his forehead. And he would
like a tattoo on his forehead.
pull up one of his tattoo on his neck, and he would pull up one of his photographs, and he would say, "No fear, motherfuckers."
I like that.
Okay, maybe you wouldn't.
Well, part of it, the theme I was feeling in his talk when I was re-listening to it was like this kind of actually how my personal relationship with Harley is. It's a little bit serendipitous, and his photo career seems kind of just loaded with serendipity. Part of that being like Ray Bittigan was his wedding photographer, which you wouldn't expect that person to be the one that turns you on to analog photography necessarily.
Yeah.
And then he was talking about the national parks position that opened, and that Gerald Ortiz got that position. And that was something that Harley really was interested in.
Right.
And then he like looked him up and was like, just sent him a note. And then it turns out that Ortiz was actually here in Oregon down at the caves later on, and they met up down there, and then he like became friends with them. I just feel like he's kind of like a perfect example of someone who's just kind of followed their bliss. And then shit just happens.
Yeah, I mean, it was meant to happen for him. It clearly was. For you, Blue, are you still into this whole photo thing? Like, does this still do it for you? Because I asked because I think I might have to move on to something that's way easier, like architecture.
Yeah,
architecture seems super easy.
How about designing chemistry labs? How about that?
Yeah. I mean, what could be easier than that?
That seems
right?
easy. Yeah, that seems totally easy. Let's do it. Let's change our occupation.
That's right. I'm going to do it now. Perfect time. Perfect time to change.
As soon as we sign out.
I'm done.
That's it. Photo world's over.